So now I'm ready to thread my pre-cut elastic into my waist channel. So I'm going to use 2 safety pins for this, and one is going to be the safety pin that I use as a threader. And we've always got safety pins, so they're a really useful little tool to have. And then the second safety pin I'm going to use to anchor my elastic to the centre back seam allowance, so there's no chance that it pings out as I thread it through the channel. So I'm just pinning my elastic to the back seam allowance to stop that from pinging all the way out. Okay, so I'm going to grab my safety pin and I'm going to guide this under and through this channel, and then using my left hand I'm going to slide a little bit of fabric over that safety pin, and then with my right hand I'm going to pull the channel so that the elastic pops inside. And then I'm going to keep repeating. So I'm sliding fabric over my safety pin, then I'm coming back and holding onto the waist channel and pulling the elastic inside that channel. So I'm going to keep threading the elastic through the waist channel all the way around. So I'm sliding my fabric over my safety pin, and then I'm coming back, and this time I'm actually sliding the fabric now over the elastic with my right hand, further down the waist channel to make sure that more elastic goes inside like this. Using my right hand to slide that fabric along the elastic, pinching and holding the elastic as I smooth that fabric back towards the opening. I'm sliding that fabric along over the elastic, pinching the elastic with my left hand, and then just pulling. So now all the elastic has just gone inside. And then we're just going to continue threading the very last section. And now I've almost come to the end, and I'm just going to pull my safety pin out. And I also want to pull out a little length of the elastic so I can make a join. And now I'm going to take that first safety pin out that was holding the end onto the seam allowance. So I'm removing that first safety pin, and I'm grabbing hold of this bit and pulling that. So I've got 2 little tails. So take both safety pins out. You can see that my elastic hasn't twisted. It's really important when you make your join that you don't stitch the elastic exactly like this. That's going to make a nasty wedge inside. It's not very comfy. So what we need to do is to actually overlap the ends of our elastic so that we're making a continuous ring. So I've made a little overlap of about 3/4 of an inch. And then with my finger on the overlap, I'm just going to grab a pin and position that pin in the middle of the overlap. So now I've put the overlap in my elastic, I'm ready to take this to the sewing machine and just sew 2 parallel rows of straight stitching to make a join in the elastic. So I'm ready to stitch my elastic join together, but before I take it right under the machine, I want a little bit more space. So I'm just going to pull the elastic out, and that means that there's more elastic for me to slide it underneath the machine. So now I've got a bit more space to sew. I'm actually going to guide this right underneath the machine and sew 2 parallel rows of stitching, one either side of the pin. Okay, so I'm sliding this underneath the machine, lowering my foot, bringing my needle in, and I'm going to remove this pin and I'm going to sew forwards all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to reverse all the way to the top, and then just sew a couple of stitches forwards. So elastic's a little bit temperamental, and by doing it that way rather than back stitching, you may get less of a jam. And then I'm going to again slide this back in, and I'm sewing a second row of stitching a little bit away from the first row, sewing all the way forwards, and then all the way backwards to the top, and then a couple forwards. I'm going to remove my needle from the work, raise my foot, snip my tails, and now my elastic has been joined in the middle. So now I've joined my elastic, I'm just going to give the waist a little tug, and that's going to encourage the elastic to pop inside the channel. And the next step is I need to pin the little opening that we left to thread the elastic in closed, and then bring it back to the machine and stitch it. Okay, so now I've stitched the join in my elastic. I'm going to tuck that back inside the channel, and now I need to pop a few pins just to hold this opening that we left in the channel closed, so that we can take it to the machine and stitch it. And it's worth pinning so that we don't stitch onto our elastic. So I'm just sliding that little opening under the machine, and I'm going to start my stitching just above where I finished, and I'm bringing my needle in and starting a stitch before where I finished the last row of stitching. And just hold this taut and use your fingernail to make sure you don't stitch into the elastic. So a couple forwards, couple back, and we're just filling in that little gap. So I'm just holding this taut, and then to finish I'm going to just go over the last bit of stitching, then do some back stitching, raise up my needle, raise my foot, slide that out and snip. Okay, so I just need to snip off all my tails, and now that waist channel is complete.